Hello, this is the Chapter 3 Excel lesson. In this short lesson we're going to talk about some of the basics of creating charts and tables in Microsoft Excel. So to start off with, I have entered here some data from Figure 3.8, Figure 3.34, and Figure 3.43 in the Excel guide. So our first set of data here contains some data on 10 different patients, and it lists their gender and their symptom severity. And so we're going to use this data to illustrate how to create pivot tables and pivot charts. And so let's just click on Insert. You don't have to select any data yet. And then under Pivot Table, click this drop-down box, and then select Pivot Chart. And so first we need to select the range that contains our data. Now there may be something entered there. Just click on this drop down box and let's just select this column containing sex. And then we need to choose where do we want to put the pivot table and the pivot chart. We can either put it in a new worksheet or in the existing worksheet. Let's choose this, and then in this box let's choose cell E1 and click OK. Now it's going to give us this funny output. Over here we need to set up exactly how we want things to look. And so we're going to choose this box next to sex, and then we're going to left click and drag and hold this down underneath value. And so this has created two things. Here is created what we call a pivot table, and then this graph is called a pivot chart. And so this creates a column graph. We see we got two columns, one for females, one for males, and the height is the frequency. So we see we've got 5 females and 5 males. And so let's look at how we can create a similar table and chart for our symptom severity. So let's go Insert, Pivot Table, Pivot Chart. And for this range here, we'll choose the column of symptom severity. Under where to put it, let's choose existing worksheet, location E6, click OK, and again we're going to choose symptom severity, left click, hold and drag that underneath the values, and we see that we get a chart here with 3 columns. And so from here we can see that we had, for instance, 2 people who had mild symptoms, 5 that had moderate, and 3 that had severe. And so some things that we can do with this are, we click here on this drop down box. We don't have to select all the different categories. Maybe I only care about those that were mild and severe, for instance. So click OK, and we see that we only have two columns. Let's put all 3 of those back. And we can also do some formatting to these charts. For instance, maybe I don't like the color here, so let's do a right click on one of the columns, go to Format Data Series, and some things I can change here, like the gap width. How much space is there between those columns? Maybe I don't want any width, so I'll choose 0. Fill, maybe I don't like that color, so let's change that to a nice green. Border colors, this is going to put a nice border around each one of the columns. Maybe do a solid line in black, or you can choose whatever color you want. Some other modifications we can do. Maybe I don't like these horizontal lines, so I can just do a left click on one of those and hit delete. So for some reason it didn't work. Let's try this again. There we go. There I've selected just the horizontal lines. Hit delete. And maybe I don't like this legend over here, so we'll click on that and hit delete. We can resize things. We can change we can change font, and this title, maybe I don't like this, and so we'll retitle it Pivot Chart or something. Okay. So a lot of different formatting things that we can do with this type of chart and any type of chart as well. Let's look at our second set of data here from Figure 334, and this contains some information on a bunch of different patients and their blood pressure categories. We've got 4 different categories here, and this column contains the number of people in each one of those categories. So one thing we might want to calculate is the total sample size. So we can just add up those frequencies. So we'll type in this formula sum that we saw back from chapter 1 and 2. And so that tells us we've got a total of 3,533 patients in our sample. Now one thing we might want to calculate, another thing, is the relative frequency. Relative frequency is like another term for percentage. So I'm going to calculate the percentage of our sample that are in each one of these categories. And so to calculate a percentage, we're simply going to say equals, take our frequency, and divide it by the total. Hit enter. And so there we've got 34%. Now this is formatted as a percent, and maybe yours didn't do that, but if we want to format as a percent, we can do a right click and then format cell, and then under number select percentage, and you can select the number of decimal places you want. 2 is the default. Maybe we'll change it to 1, and then click OK. And so now everything's going to be formatted as a percentage. So we see that 34.1% are in this first category. Now if I click and try to drag this down, we look at what happens here. If we click up here, we can see what numbers this formula is referencing. So now it's taking this frequency here divided by the number in this cell, but there's no number in that cell, and so that's why it's giving us a divided by 0 error. So let's delete that cell and go back and modify our formula here. The problem is that when we copied this down, it changed the reference to everything, and so we want to fix those references. Specifically, we want to fix the reference in the denominator. So if we click on the B6 there in that formula and then hit the F4 key, that's going to put $ in front of the B and the 6. So that's going to fix that reference to that cell. If we hit enter, it doesn't change anything for that cell. But now if I copy this down, we see we don't get an error. And if we look at what numbers it's referencing or what cells it's referencing, we see that everything is correct. And so let's copy this down, and we're going to get the rest of the percentages. Okay. Now a list of numbers like this, these relative frequencies, these are hard to look at. And so we want to create a picture of what those numbers are telling us, or specifically we want to create a type of graph. So what we're going to do is create a bar graph where each bar, we have one bar for each category, and then the height is going to equal our relative frequencies. And so to select this data, let's highlight this first column and then hold down the control key and highlight the second column. And then go to Insert, Column, and let's choose this first type, 2D column. And so there it gave us a nice graph. We see that we've got one column for each of our categories, and we see the height there equals the relative frequency. And we can modify things like we did with the pivot chart. We can get rid of those horizontal lines if we don't like it. We can get rid of this legend, and that looks a little bit nicer. We can change colors if we want, do all sorts of things. So the benefit of a graph like this is that it allows us to easily compare these different categories. We can see that the most frequent category was this pre-hypertension category, the second was normal, third was stage 1, the last was stage 2. Looking at a picture like this is a lot easier than looking at a list of numbers like this. Now another type of chart that we could have drawn was a pie chart. And so we can create a pie chart very similar. Highlight those two columns, go to Insert, Pie Chart, and let's do just a 2D pie. And there we get a pie chart. So that's very easy to create, and a lot of people would prefer a pie chart, but the problem with a pie chart is that it's kind of hard to compare categories, or it's not as easy to compare categories as this type of chart here. Like for instance, it's more difficult to compare this slice here, this blue slice which corresponds to normal, and this red slice, which corresponds to pre-hypertension. It's kind of hard to tell which slice is bigger. If we look over here at this chart, we see right away that this column is much higher, and so this category is much more frequent. And so pie chart is appropriate for this type of data, but it may not be the best choice. In fact, we want to try to stay away from pie charts because it's harder to compare categories in a pie chart than it is with a bar chart like this. Now, our last set of data here in figure 43 contains the body mass index and systolic blood pressure of 12 different patients. And what we want to do here is to look for a relationship between body mass index and systolic blood pressure. We might suspect that as the BMI increases, then systolic blood pressure is also going to increase. If we examine our data, we maybe see that that's the case. As this number increases, this number tends to increase. But it's very hard to see that relationship in a list of numbers like this. And so we're going to create a scatter plot of this data to illustrate that relationship. So let's highlight these two columns, go to Insert, and then Scatter, and select this first type here. And there it creates a scatter plot. So if we click on one of those data values, like let's click on this one here or mouse over it, and we see the coordinates of that point. It has 22.9, so that's the body mass index of that person, and then 115 was his systolic blood pressure. And so specifically that's the graph, or that's the plot of this particular piece of data. And so to plot this data, it went over to 22.9 on the horizontal axis and up to 115 on the vertical axis, and put a dot there. Now, one problem here with this chart is that our axes have got rather large scales. So, for instance, here on this horizontal axis, that corresponds to body mass index, but our numbers over here only go from about 20 up to 35 or so. And so let's change this so we can get a better idea of what's going on. So if we go to Format Axis, we can set our minimum value. Let's change this to like 20, and then the max is let's change this to like 35. And so that gives us a better range of values. Now likewise, our systolic blood pressures, let's change that. So we're going to do a right click, Format Axis. The minimum is, I don't know, let's go to like 100. And the maximum, just looking at our numbers, looks like the max is 165. So let's set a max here of 170. And oh, that was probably a lot bigger than we really needed, wasn't it? What happened here? I think we lost a value. Oh, we lost a value because our highest body mass index was 140, so we need to go back and change our horizontal axis. So let's set the max here to like 45. And there we go. Now, looking at this chart, we can see that as we move from left to right, the body mass index increases, and at the same time the systolic blood pressure increases. And so this chart here illustrates that relationship. That is, BMI increases, the systolic blood pressure also increases.